Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
Michael had always craved silence. The city, with its endless hum of traffic, shouting neighbors, and the relentless buzz of his phone, had worn him down to a raw nerve. When he found the listing for the old farmhouse on the edge of Ellswood, a forgotten speck of a town surrounded by flat, empty fields, it felt like fate. The rent was absurdly low, $300 a month for a 2-story house with creaking porches and weathered shutters. The landlord, a gruff man named Hargrove, with a face like cracked leather, had been vague about why it was so cheap. "Been empty a while," he'd said over the phone, his voice clipped. "Needs a tenant who don't mind solitude." Solitude was exactly what Michael wanted. At 32, he was exhausted by his dead-end tech support job, by relationships that fizzled out before they began, by the constant pressure to be something more than he was. The farmhouse, isolated and unassuming, promised a reset. He signed the lease without visiting, packed his belongings into a rented truck, and drove the 3 hours from the city to Ellswood. The house stood alone at the end of a gravel road, its white paint peeling like dead skin. The fields around it stretched endlessly, their golden stalks swaying under a sky that seemed too big, too open. The nearest neighbor was a mile away, and the town itself, a cluster of a general store, a diner, and a gas station, was a 10-minute drive. Perfect, Michael thought as he unloaded boxes. No noise, no interruptions, no one to ask him why he was running away. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet. The house groaned under the weight of the wind, its timbers creaking like an old ship. Michael slept fitfully in the upstairs bedroom, the mattress sagging beneath him, the air heavy with the scent of dust and aged wood. He dreamed of standing in an empty field, the grass whispering his name. But when he woke, the house was still. He chalked it up to nerves. New places always felt strange at first. By the second night, he noticed something off. He'd turned off all the lights before bed, plunging the house into darkness. But it wasn't dark. A faint, sickly glow seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, as though the wood was porous, letting something seep through. He sat up in bed, squinting at the walls. The light wasn't steady. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He got up, barefoot, and pressed his hand against the plaster. It was cool, but not cold, and there was a faint vibration, almost imperceptible. He leaned closer, ear to the wall, and froze. A low, steady sound came from the other side, a rhythmic inhale and exhale, like someone breathing just out of sight. He stumbled back, heart pounding. It was probably just the wind, he told himself, caught in some quirk of the house's structure. Old houses made noises, pipes, drafts, settling beams. He repeated this like a mantra as he crawled back into bed, pulling the blankets over his head like a child. But sleep didn't come easily. The breathing seemed to follow him, faint but persistent, as if the house itself were alive. By the third night, Michael abandoned the bedroom. The pulsing glow was stronger there, and he'd caught himself staring at the walls, convinced they were moving, flexing like muscle under skin. He dragged a blanket to the living room and slept on the sagging couch. But even there, the walls seemed to watch him. In the corner of his eye, they shimmered, their edges softening and shifting. He'd turn to look, and they'd be still, mocking his paranoia. The breathing was louder now, too, syncing with his own breaths in a way that made his skin crawl. He tried holding his breath, counting to 10, but the rhythm continued, unbroken, as if the house didn't need him to keep it going. He spent the next day exploring the house, searching for an explanation. The farmhouse was old, at least a century, with narrow hallways and rooms that felt too small for their purpose. The kitchen was outdated, its linoleum floor curling at the edges, and the pantry was a cramped alcove stuffed with empty shelves. He checked the walls for wiring issues, thinking maybe faulty electrics caused the glow, but found nothing unusual. The breathing, he decided, was just his imagination, amplified by isolation. He'd read about cabin fever, how solitude could twist the mind. He wasn't crazy. He just needed to get out. He drove to the diner in town, a greasy spoon called Mabel's with flickering fluorescent lights, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, poured him coffee and asked if he was new. When he mentioned the farmhouse, her expression tightened. "That place?" she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Been empty a long time. You sure you're comfortable out there?" "It's fine," Michael said, forcing a smile. "Just settling in." She nodded, but didn't meet his eyes. "Folks say it's got a history. Not my place to tell tales, but be careful." He laughed it off, but her words stuck with him. On the drive back, the fields seemed to close in, the horizon swallowing the road. The house looked different when he pulled up, its windows darker, like eyes that had been watching too long. He shook off the thought and went inside, determined to ignore the strangeness. That night, the fourth night, he found the room. He was in the kitchen, heating a can of soup on the ancient stove, when he noticed a faint outline in the pantry wall. It wasn't obvious, just a hairline seam where the shelves ended, barely visible in the dim light. He frowned, running his fingers along it. The wood felt different there, softer, almost pliable. He'd walked past the pantry a dozen times and never noticed it, but now it seemed to call to him, like a memory he'd forgotten. He grabbed a kitchen knife and wedged it into the seam, prying until the outline gave way to a narrow door. The smell hit him first, mildew, copper, and something deeper, like rotting meat. The door opened into a small, windowless room, no bigger than a closet. Its walls were bare, not plaster or wood, but something smoother, almost organic, glistening faintly as if coated in moisture. The air was thick, heavy with that same coppery rot. Michael's stomach churned, but he stepped inside, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. The door slammed shut behind him. He spun around, heart hammering, and pushed against it. It didn't budge. The knife was still in his hand, but the seam was gone. The door fused seamlessly with the wall. His phone, which he'd pulled from his pocket, flickered, its light dimming as if the room were draining it. He banged on the door, shouting, but the sound didn't carry. It was like screaming into a void. The walls swallowed his voice, muffling it into nothing. Then the walls moved. Not like settling wood or creaking beams, but like living tissue, flexing and tightening. The room seemed to shrink, the walls inching closer, their surface rippling like muscle under skin. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He pressed his hands against the nearest wall, and it yielded slightly, warm and slick under his palms. He yanked his hands back, wiping them on his jeans, his mind racing for an explanation. This couldn't be real. Houses didn't move. Walls didn't breathe. But the breathing was there, louder now, filling the room. It matched his own. Inhale for inhale, exhale for exhale, until he couldn't tell where his breath ended and the houses began. Then came the scratching, dozens of nails clawing at the walls, just beyond his reach. Whispers followed, faint at first, then growing into a cacophony of voices, overlapping, frantic. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, guttural and sharp, like knives scraping bone. Some sounded like they were begging, others laughing, all of them pressing against his skull. He pounded on the door, his fists leaving red smears on the wood. The whispers turned to screams, distorted and raw, echoing inside the room. He screamed back, his voice lost in theirs, until his throat burned. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The silence was worse, thick, oppressive, like the air itself was holding its breath. The door creaked open. Michael stumbled out, gasping, into the kitchen. But it wasn't the same kitchen. The linoleum was cracked, covered in a layer of dust so thick it looked like snow. The stove was rusted, the cabinets warped. The light outside the window wasn't morning or night. It was gray, a stagnant, lifeless haze. He grabbed his phone from the floor where he'd dropped it. The screen was dead, no signal, no power. But when he tilted it, he saw his reflection, and behind him, a figure. Its eyes were black pits, its mouth stretched into an impossible grin, teeth sharp and uneven. He whipped around, but nothing was there. The kitchen was empty. He ran. The front door led not to the porch, but to another hallway, longer than it should have been, lined with doors he didn't recognize. He flung one open, expecting the fields outside, but found another room, bare, like the one in the pantry, its walls pulsing faintly. The smell of blood was stronger here, and the floor was littered with papers. He picked one up, a photograph, black and white, of a family standing in front of the farmhouse. Their faces were blurred, as if the camera had moved at the last second. Another photo showed a man, maybe his age, standing alone, his expression blank. Michael's hands shook as he found more. Dozens of photos, all of people he didn't know, all in front of the farmhouse. The most recent was in color, grainy but clear. Him, standing on the porch, taken today. He dropped the photo and ran again, through door after door, each leading to another version of the house. Some rooms were pristine, as if freshly built. Others were decayed, their walls sagging, floors slick with something dark and sticky. In one, he found a mirror, its surface clouded but reflecting not his face, but hers. The figure from his phone, her grin wider now, her eyes following him as he backed away. In another room, he heard weeping, soft and distant, coming from the walls. He pressed his ear against one and felt it pulse, warm and alive, the sobbing vibrating through his skull. The breathing never stopped. It followed him, always there, sometimes soft, sometimes loud, always matching his own. He tried to hold his breath again, to break the rhythm, but the house didn't care. It breathed for him. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time felt broken, stretched thin. His legs ached, his throat was raw, but he kept moving, driven by the instinct to escape. The house seemed to shift around him, doors leading to places he'd already been, hallways looping back on themselves. He found a staircase that spiraled down into darkness, but when he descended, it brought him back to the kitchen, the same kitchen, dust-covered and wrong. He started talking to himself, muttering to stay sane. "This isn't real," he said over and over. "It's a dream, a hallucination." But the weight of the air, the slickness of the walls, the photographs, they were too real. He found more photos, scattered like leaves, some showing people screaming, others smiling blankly, all standing in front of the farmhouse. In one, he saw the waitress from the diner, younger, her eyes wide with terror. He began to piece together fragments of the house's history. In one room, he found a journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was shaky, the entries dated decades apart. One, from 1923, described a family moving in, only to hear voices in the walls by the third night. Another, from 1956, mentioned a hidden room that ate sound. The final entry, from 1987, was a single sentence: "The house doesn't let you leave." The rest of the pages were blank. Michael realized he wasn't alone. The footsteps started faintly, echoing behind him, always just out of sight. When he turned, he saw nothing, but the air grew heavier, as if someone, or something, was close. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision, tall and thin, their shapes wrong, like bodies stretched too long. Sometimes he heard laughter, sharp and cruel, echoing through the halls. He tried to map the house in his mind, to find a pattern, but it was like navigating a maze that changed with every step. He marked doors with the knife, carving X's into the wood, but when he returned, the marks were gone. Or worse, they'd multiplied, covering entire walls in jagged scratches. The house was playing with him. Exhaustion set in. His body screamed for rest, but he didn't dare stop. He found a room with a single chair, its wood warped and stained. He sat just for a moment, and the walls seemed to lean in, their breathing louder, closer. The figure from the reflection appeared again, not in a mirror, but standing across the room, its grin splitting its face. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Michael bolted, the chair toppling behind him. He lost track of time. His phone was useless, the gray light outside never changed, and his body felt heavy, like the house was draining him. He found food in some versions of the kitchen, cans of soup, moldy bread, but it tasted wrong, like ash. Water from the sink was thick, metallic, leaving a coppery film on his tongue. He ate only enough to keep moving. The worst moments came when the house seemed to pause, as if considering him. The breathing would stop, the walls still, and a silence so deep it hurt would settle over him. In those moments, he felt the house's attention, like a predator sizing up prey. Then the noises would return, scratching, whispering, footsteps, and he'd run again. He began to wonder if he was dead. Maybe the room had killed him, and this was some kind of purgatory, an endless loop of doors and halls. But the pain in his hands, the blood on his knuckles, the ache in his legs, they were too real. He was alive, and the house wanted him that way. One room held a clue. It was larger than the others, its walls covered in scratches, not random, but deliberate, forming words, names, dates. He read them by the faint glow of the walls. Eleanor, 1894. Thomas, 1923. Clara, 1956. Dozens of names, stretching back over a century. At the bottom, freshly carved, was his own, Michael, 2025. He touched it, and the wall pulsed under his fingers, warm and wet. He stumbled back, his heart racing. The house knew him. It had always known him. He tried to reason with it. "What do you want?" he shouted, his voice breaking. The walls didn't answer, but the breathing grew louder, mocking him. He found another door, this one heavier, made of iron. It opened into a room that wasn't a room at all, but a void. Black, endless, the air so cold it burned. He stepped back, slamming the door shut, but not before something in the darkness moved, a shape too large to comprehend. He was losing himself. His thoughts fragmented, his memories blurring. He couldn't remember his life before the house, couldn't picture the city or his old apartment. All he had was the farmhouse, its endless rooms, its breathing walls. He found a photograph of himself as a child, standing in front of the house, but that was impossible. He'd never been here before. Or had he? The house was rewriting him, folding him into its history. In a moment of desperation, he tried to destroy it. He found a can of kerosene in a basement room and poured it over the walls, striking matches he'd found in a drawer. The flames caught, but they didn't burn right. They flickered blue, then green, and the walls seemed to drink them, growing brighter, stronger. The fire didn't hurt the house, it fed it. He collapsed in a hallway, too tired to run anymore. The breathing was all around him now, inside him, filling his lungs. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he saw the house's heart. A pulsing, writhing mass, deep within the walls, connected by veins of light that ran through every room. It wasn't a house at all, he realized. It was alive, a creature that wore the shape of a house, feeding on those who entered. He opened his eyes and saw the figure again, closer now, its grin so wide, it split its face in two. It reached for him, its fingers long and sharp, but he scrambled to his feet and ran. The house laughed, a sound like breaking glass, echoing through the halls. He doesn't know how long he's been running now. Days, weeks, years, it's all the same. The house won't let him leave. The doors lead nowhere. The windows show only gray. The photographs keep appearing, more of him now, taken in rooms he doesn't remember entering. The breathing is constant, a reminder that the house is always there, always watching. Sometimes he hears the others, Eleanor, Thomas, Clara, the ones whose names are carved into the walls. Their voices beg him to run, to fight, but they're trapped too, their screams fading into the house's endless hunger. He knows he's part of it now, another name, another face in its collection. But he keeps moving, because stopping means giving up. He clutches the knife, its blade dulled from carving futile marks into the walls. He tells himself he'll find a way out, that the house can't hold him forever. But deep down, he knows the truth. The house doesn't let you leave, and the breathing, always there, matches his own.